The sun peeked over the great green canopy of the forest, sending golden shafts of light directly into the coziest nest in the tallest oak tree. For most of the young bluebirds tucked inside, it was the most exciting morning of their lives. This was the day. First flight day. I'm going to soar all the way to Whispering Creek and back before lunch, chirped Orion, puffing out his chest so that his little blue feathers stood on end. He practiced flapping his wings, sending tiny bits of twig and dried grass swirling around the nest. "You'll be lucky if you make it to the next branch, Orion," giggled his sister, Willow, as she stretched one wing and then the other, mimicking their mother's elegant warm-ups. Pip, the smallest of the bunch, bounced on his feet. "I want to see what a worm looks like from the sky. Does it look like a little brown wiggle?" Amidst all the cheerful chaos, one little bluebird remained perfectly still. Skye was huddled at the very back of the nest, trying to make herself as small as possible. While her siblings saw a world of adventure waiting for them, Skye saw something else entirely. When she dared to peek over the edge of their woven home, her tummy did a sickening flip. The ground was a dizzying, blurry patchwork of green and brown, so far away it made her feathers tingle with fear. The wind, which her siblings called the lifting breeze, felt like a monster trying to snatch her from the safety of the nest. She squeezed her eyes shut. She loved their nest. It was warm, safe, and most importantly, it was absolutely, positively not moving. Why would anyone want to leave? Grandpa Elmsworth, perched on a nearby branch, watched the flurry of activity with a gentle smile. His own flight feathers were a handsome, dusty blue, and his eyes held the calm wisdom of many seasons. He noticed Skye's trembling, how she pressed herself into the corner as if hoping to merge with the twigs. He didn't say anything, but his gaze was soft and understanding. "All right, nestlings, who's first?" their father called, his voice a proud and booming song from the branch just outside the nest. "Me, me, me, me," shouted Orion, hopping right to the edge. He didn't even look down. He struck a pose, one wing held high like a superhero. Prepare to witness the most amazing first flight in the history of bluebirds. The wind is my servant, and the sky is my playground. Skye burrowed deeper into the nest, a tiny whimper escaping her beak. She couldn't watch. She didn't want to see him leap into that huge, terrifying emptiness. This wasn't exciting. It was frightening. With a mighty Geronimo, that was far too big for his little body. Orion launched himself from the edge of the nest. For one glorious second, he was airborne, a perfect silhouette against the bright morning sky. Skye held her breath. Then, the perfection ended. Instead of soaring, Orion's wings seemed to forget what they were for. One flapped up while the other flapped down. He tilted violently to the left, then wobbled dramatically to the right. He didn't fly forward. He tumbled downward like a blue feather duster dropped from a shelf. There was a frantic flurry of feathers and a surprise squawk, followed by a soft thump and a rustle of leaves. Willow and Pip peered over the edge, bursting into giggles. Orion was sitting on a thick branch just 10 feet below the nest, looking bewildered. A single large leaf was draped over his head like a floppy green hat. "I did that on purpose," he shouted up, shaking the leaf from his head. "It was a super secret dive bomb technique to trick the squirrels." Grandpa Elmsworth let out a soft chuckle that sounded like rustling leaves. Skye, however, didn't find it funny at all. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. She had seen him fall. He had dropped like a stone, tumbling through the very emptiness she was so afraid of. The sight sent a fresh wave of icy dread through her. Undeterred, Orion crouched on his branch, preparing for a second launch. "Okay, now for real flight," he announced. He leaped again, flapping with all his might. This time, he managed to stay in the air for a few yards, but he flew in a wobbly corkscrew pattern before landing ungracefully in a large bush full of fluffy white blossoms. Poof! A cloud of white petals exploded into the air. "I'm just pollinating," Orion's muffled voice called from inside the bush. By now, Willow and Pip were rolling with laughter. "You look like a snowbird," Pip chirped. Orion finally scrambled out of the bush covered in white fluff. He shook himself, sending petals everywhere. On his third try, he finally got the hang of it. His flapping became more even, and he soared out in a wide, triumphant arc, still a bit wobbly, but definitely flying. "See, I told you," he yelled back, his voice already distant. The laughter in the nest subsided as their father's voice returned. "Excellent! Now, Willow, you're next." Willow, full of confidence after watching Orion's silly display, gave a quick, excited nod. She hopped to the edge, gave a graceful flap, and sailed off into the air, her flight smooth and steady from the very first moment. Then Pip went, and after a tiny nervous hesitation, he too was airborne, chasing after his sister. Suddenly, the nest felt enormous and empty. It was just Skye and her grandfather watching patiently from his branch. The wind whispered around the edge of the nest, sounding to Skye like it was calling her name. The silence in the nest was louder than all the earlier chirping had been. With her siblings gone, the world felt vast and empty, and the nest, once a bustling home, now felt like a tiny, lonely island in an endless sky. Skye could hear the whoosh of the wind more clearly, and it sounded like it was trying to pull her out into the terrifying blue yonder. She shuffled her feet, her tiny claws gripping the woven twigs so tightly they ached. She was the last one. She had failed. Just then, a gentle shadow fell over her. Grandpa Elmsworth had flown from his perch and landed silently on the opposite edge of the nest. He didn't say, "It's time to go," or "Don't be scared." He just settled his feathers and looked at her with his kind, crinkly eyes. "It's a long way down, isn't it?" he said softly. Skye flinched, surprised that he wasn't scolding her. She could only manage a tiny, trembling nod. "I have a secret," Grandpa Elmsworth whispered, leaning forward slightly. "On my first flight, I didn't soar like an eagle. Do you know what I did?" Skye shook her head, her eyes wide with curiosity. "I landed on my father's head," he chirped, a twinkle in his eye. "He was waiting on the branch below, and I flapped so hard and so clumsily that I landed right on him, all feet and feathers. He said I was the silliest looking hat he'd ever worn." A tiny giggle escaped Skye's beak, a sound she hadn't expected to make. "Your brother Orion," Grandpa continued, "he thinks flying is about being the boldest and the fastest. He thinks you have to conquer the sky. But that's not the secret. The wind doesn't ask for a conqueror. It just asks for a little trust. He looked out at the wide open air. It doesn't matter if you soar to the creek or just flutter to the next branch. All that matters is that you find enough courage for one little push, for one little lift. Your flight belongs to you, Skye, no one else. You can take it at your own pace. He called his words a whisper, but to Skye, they felt as strong and solid as the oak tree itself. He wasn't telling her not to be afraid. He was telling her it was okay to be afraid, and that courage wasn't about a big, brave leap, but maybe just a small, timid one. She looked at her own wings, really looked at them for the first time. They were small, but the feathers were strong. She thought of Orion's tumble, Willow's grace, and Grandpa's story of landing on his father's head. Everyone's flight was different. Slowly, deliberately, Skye stood up. She took a deep breath that still hitched with a little fear, and she walked to the edge of the nest, the place she had been avoiding all morning. She looked down, and the world still spun beneath her, but this time, something was different. She wasn't just thinking about the fall. She was thinking about Grandpa's words, a little lift. Skye stood on the precipice, the wind ruffling the downy feathers on her head. Her gaze flickered between Grandpa Elmsworth's encouraging face and the dizzying drop below. Every instinct screamed at her to retreat to the safety of the nest, to huddle in the corner until the world stopped feeling so big. But Grandpa's words echoed in her mind, a gentle counter-melody to the song of her fear. Your flight belongs to you. She squeezed her eyes shut, took one more shaky breath, and pushed off. For a terrifying instant, there was nothing. No twigs beneath her claws, no nest around her. Just the horrible, stomach-lurching feeling of falling. Panic seized her. She flailed, just as she had seen Orion do, her wings beating against the air with no rhythm or purpose. The ground rushed up to meet her, a blur of green and brown. This was it. This was the end she had feared all morning. But then, through the roaring in her ears, she heard that whisper again, as if the wind itself was carrying Grandpa's voice. A little lift. It wasn't a command. It was a suggestion, a possibility. Instead of fighting the air, instead of trying to soar, Skye did exactly what the voice suggested. She gave one small, deliberate flap downward. It wasn't much, but it was something. The terrifying plummet slowed. She tried another. Flap. The wind, which had felt like a monster, now felt like a hand, catching her and holding her up. Skye dared to open her eyes. She wasn't falling anymore. She was floating. She was hovering in the air, a few feet below her nest. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't impressive. But it was flight. A small surge of wonder pushed through her fear. She gave another flap, this one a little stronger. She moved forward, past the familiar trunk of her home tree. She saw things she had only ever glimpsed from above. She saw the intricate pattern on a ladybug's back as it crawled on a leaf. She saw a dewdrop clinging to a blade of grass, sparkling like a tiny jewel. The world wasn't a scary blur. It was beautiful and full of amazing little details. She saw her family gathered on a thick, sun-dappled branch not too far away. They were all chirping, not with laughter, but with encouragement. She aimed for them, her flight wobbly and slow. Her landing was less of a landing and more of a controlled tumble into a cluster of soft leaves. She stumbled out, a bit disheveled but standing tall on the branch. She had done it. She had flown. Before Skye could even shake the last leaf from her feathers, she was surrounded. Her mother nuzzled her head, and her father's song was filled with pride. Pip and Willow hopped around her, chirping excitedly. "You did it, Skye! You were amazing!" Willow chirped. Then Orion pushed his way through. Skye braced herself for a boast or a joke about her wobbly landing. But her brother just looked at her, his eyes wide with genuine admiration. "That was really brave, Skye," he said, his voice unusually quiet. "I just jumped, but you were scared, and you get it anyway. That's different. That's really brave." Coming from Orion, the words meant more than any soaring praise could. Skye felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the sun. She looked over at Grandpa Elmsworth, who gave her a slow, proud wink. He flew over to join them, landing gracefully beside her. "Some birds are born to race the wind," Grandpa said, looking at Orion with a smile. "And some birds are born to dance with the breeze," he added, nodding to Willow. "But all birds in their own time find their own sky." He looked directly at Skye. "Your sky might not be about speed or height, little one. It might be about seeing all the beautiful things the fast flyers miss." Skye looked out from the branch, her new home in the wide open world. She looked back up at the nest, which now seemed small and distant. It had been her whole world, a fortress against her fear. Now it was just a starting point. The fear hadn't vanished completely. She could still feel a tiny flutter of it in her tummy, but it no longer owned her. It was just a feeling, and it was much smaller than the great, big, beautiful world waiting for her. "Come on," their father chirped, taking to the air. "Let's show Skye the view from above Whispering Creek." One by one, her family leaped into the wind. This time, Skye didn't hesitate. With a feeling that was more excitement than fear, she pushed off the branch and joined them. She wasn't the fastest like Orion or the most graceful like Willow. She flew with a steady, gentle rhythm, her eyes wide open, taking everything in. She noticed the way the sunlight made patterns on the water, the brilliant orange of the poppies in the meadow, and the funny, lopsided way a baby rabbit hopped below. She was flying at her own pace, and for the first time in her life, she felt completely and wonderfully free. She had found her courage, she had found her wings, and she had found her very own sky.